that true? I believe that was the story. That was the first one.
That could actually be true. Well, speaking of decks with no Force of Will, neither of these decks have Force of Will. Ross Merriam's playing Elves. He's playing against Damon Whitby's Dredge deck.
Yeah, we've had a lot of manaless Dredge on camera the last couple of weeks. Damon playing a more classic style. No real big reanimation target. This is a pretty streamlined build. I mean, there's not even a Flamekin Zealot hanging out here. It's just Narcomoebas, Icarids, the Dredge creatures in question, and Bridge from Below as the way to win.
Yeah, for those of you not familiar with the matchup, but this is going to be a pretty quick matchup between the two decks. Both decks are goldfishing. We see here, Whitby was on 6 cards. Dredge, though, not a problem with mulligans for the most part. There are some difficulties with the Dredge deck. Elves, because it has creatures, can nuke Bridge from Below sometimes. You see, Whitby is off to the races here. He had a turn 1 Putrid Imp and discarded a Dredger, discarded a Stinkweed Imp during his draw step. You see here, he hit a Narcomoeba, and for the turn now is casting Faithless Looting.
So for those of you not super familiar with Legacy play, all the Dredge is trying to do is flip over its graveyard here by replacing its draws with Dredges. You're seeing this Faithless Looting getting flashback. This is going to allow him to get Narcomoebas into play and Bridge from Below's into the graveyard alongside Cabal Therapies, which allow him to attack Ross's hand and put more tokens into play, all this eventually culminating with potentially a large reanimate, although that package is not available in Damon's deck, or just overwhelming with Icarid and zombie tokens from Bridge from Below.
Yeah, the cards like Dread Return and Cabal Therapy fall flashback for the cost of sacrificing a creature. So these Narcomoebas die, make a ton of zombies, and yeah, then you can basically win at will with those creatures.
Yeah, and Mana Confluence and add to Damon's deck here. Usually these Dredge decks play City of Brass. Rashadan Port is a card in the format. And so Mana Confluence is a marginal upgrade over that City of Brass slot.
Yeah. As you see here, he actually has taken the opportunity to better the mana base. So traditionally, the Dredge mana base has been 4 City of Brass, 4 Gemstone Mine. He's now on 4 Confluence, 4 Mine, 2 Cities. So he's actually upped what I would refer to as the Utopia lands. He's upped his Utopia land count up to 10.
Yeah, at some points, Dredge decks have even played cards like Tarnished Citadel. They've really dug deep to try to get enough 5-color lands in the deck, because you're often playing the game with only 1 land and you need to cast Breakthrough, Faithless Looting, occasionally Cabal Therapies that are in your hand, and so forth. So the deck's pretty color mana sensitive and doesn't play a lot of lands. It has a lot of interest in playing with 5-color lands, and Mana Confluence is a big upgrade there potentially.
All right, so on Ross Merriam's turn, he made a second land, made a Birchlore Rangers, and had nothing else to join his Nettle Sentinel. This is going to set up a really big turn for Dredge. Ross will probably be under pressure to win on turn 3 or to do something very close to winning. He has one glimpse of nature, however, from having quite the engine assembled with Elves, and we can explain that more if or when we get to it.
Yeah, Ross's board looks fairly innocuous right now. A Nettle Sentinel and a Birchlore Ranger, but he is fully capable of winning the next turn from this base, especially if he's able to find Glimpse of Nature.
Yeah, so Damon Whitby, during his upkeep, Damon goes ahead and brings 2 Icarids back into play. If you exile a black creature, he'll come out of the graveyard for 1 turn. This is an attack then with the Imp, 2 Narcomoebas, and 2 Icarids. It's an attack for 9, and better than that, when the Icarids die, they'll each be replaced right now by a pair of zombies, thanks to the 2 Bridge from Belows in Whitby's graveyard.
Now, Damon is giving Ross the option of getting the Bridge from Belows out of the graveyard by blocking, but Damon is fully aware that Ross is capable of winning from this board, and Damon has plenty of pressure, so he's happy to make this trade. If Ross wants to block, he's less likely to go off next turn, and Damon's gladly willing to sacrifice these Bridge from Belows to make that happen.
Yeah, if Ross loses one of his creatures here, it's very unlikely he can untap and win.
Well, a Birchlore Ranger and 2 lands, it would require a very good hand, but it is not impossible.
Yeah, if he had a replacement Nettle Sentinel, perhaps, there are chances. But I think one of the big things is the difference between taking 9 and, say, taking 6 here from Ross is basically there's no difference as far as the clock. So the only reason he'd be blocking is if he wanted to get rid of those Bridge from Belows. He opted not to, took the full amount, and at Damon's end of turn, the Icarids died and made 4 zombie tokens.
Yeah. So Ross is facing lethal next turn. He can build up enough of a board to block, but ideally what he would like to do is win the game next turn. That can be facilitated by just having Glimpse or even just a lot of mana in Critterhoof Behemoth.
Yeah, he end step fetched for Dryad Arbor there so that he could use it for mana next turn. Remember, it's a creature. Dryad Arbor has good interactions with Gaia's Cradle in the deck. It's the reason he's getting that as opposed to a basic land. And we'll see just how much he has here. If Ross is going to win, this turn is going to have to, almost certainly going to have to start with a Glimpse of Nature.
What are his natural order targets? That's the big question
The main
here.
natural order target in the deck is Craterhoof Behemoth, and ordering for Craterhoof is one of the general win cons of the deck. He plays 2 Craterhoof in the deck. I suppose if he needs a piece to keep going, so say something like an Elvish Visionary or a Wirewood Symbiote to set up the pair of those two, which draws a lot of cards. He could in a pinch natural order for those, but I think because he's under so much pressure right now to win this turn, I think the natural order is basically just getting Craterhoof.
Yeah. And for me, the most interesting thing in Damon's list is just the total absence of Bridge from Below. He is sorry, not Bridge from Below, Dread Return rather. No reanimation action going on here. He is just a straight zombie and Icarate beatdown deck in essence.
And I think this is actually really interesting. A lot of the Dredge veterans that I've talked to about the deck have started to adopt this approach to the Dredge deck. We see Ross there just with 3 Gaia's Cradles, 2 more lands in a natural order. The deck only plays 20 lands, so that's really quite rare to see.
And it's possible there if Ross just draws any creature at all, he can play a Cradle, natural order for Craterhoof, and win the game. But he had all
no
lands,
creature.
just all lands, and so Damon up a game there. We would have to do the math. I mean, Damon has a lot of life to play with. He had 4 zombies back to chump block and so forth, but. Ross there, pretty unfortunate to not be able to go off with natural order, and we're going to be moving on to the sideboard.
As I said there, a lot of these Dredge veterans really are just on just maximizing the Dredge engine and minimizing, I guess, the cool plays the deck can do.
Mm-hmm.
So for sideboard, I'd like to start at least with Whitby's deck. A deck that doesn't really pay for any of its spells has very limited sideboard options.
Well, he's got some haymakers for this matchup. He has access to 3 copies of Lotus Petal and 2 City of Brass. I'm assuming that's for when he wants to bring in the Abrupt Decays in his sideboard, because it's pretty hard for him to get to 2 mana. He has access to 3 copies of Firestorm, which is an absolute beating in this matchup. Firestorm is very punishing on decks that fill with a lot of small creatures, and that's exactly what Ross has. There's a Dread Return and an Ashen Rider in his sideboard as well. I'm assuming that's for more troublesome permanents, not necessarily something he's going to be bringing against Ross. 2 copies of Chain of Vapor, also unlikely here, but I think that the 3 copies of Firestorm and maybe some of the other 5 color sources of mana to facilitate Firestorm will be coming in.
Yeah, so the entire Dredge sideboard really are things that he either has to pay 0 or 1 for. Firestorm, kind of a sleeper card from Weatherlight that is very devastating against a deck like Elves. I mean, it doesn't look good on the surface, but in your deck that actually doesn't care if you discard your entire hand. This is probably one of the most efficient sweepers out there.
Yeah, it's shown up as a weirdo in sideboards before. It showed up in Necro Donate sideboards back in the day because cards were never really a bottleneck. Mana was the bottleneck. And Dredge is a special case here because discarding cards isn't much of a cost. In fact, that's the entire point of the deck. And in terms of just raw mana efficiency, it doesn't get any better than Firestorm.
Yeah. So let's looking over at Ross's sideboard. Some of the ways he interacts with Dredge are fairly limited. I mean, the best thing he can do is have a fast hand. But the other things that he can do against the deck, if you look at the sideboard, he has, unfortunately, Dredge is completely resistant to discard. So his cards like Cabal Therapy, Thoughtseize really aren't cards in the deck. He does have a 1 of Scavenging Ooze that he can board in as a Green Sun Zenith target. It's a little slow to get out, but it really can shore up the game if he can untap with it.
Yeah, the big question mark is just going to be Firestorm. I mean, Firestorm trumps Scavenging Ooze along with everything else Ross is up to.
Yeah, Ross doesn't have a good defense for Firestorm in his deck.
You can easily imagine a draw where Ross goes turn 1 creature, Damon goes 5 color land pass, Ross goes creature, Damon goes end of your turn, Firestorm away your entire board, discard some dredgers, and that's just the end of the game. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen in other formats that Elves have been in, sometimes cards like Burnt and Forge Tender can be defenses against that. Legacy doesn't have room for that kind of card. There's not a good defense to that Ross can play.
And it's not even, it's not like Firestorm is a guaranteed 3 or 4 of in every Dredge sideboard.
Right.
And it's not like Dredge is the most popular deck in the room either. So just a little unfortunate for Ross to be caught in that crosshairs this early in the event.
Right, so other things he'll probably try to do to speed up his deck, he does have another natural order in his sideboard. He may board up to 4 of those to just try to get a fast kill. Some of your fastest draws are just where you go creature into creature into creature natural order, then win. I would say by and large, Elves speed-wise, so like you can talk about combo decks and Legacy is where they are on a speed continuum. Elves is I would say generally a turn 3 deck when not disrupted. It has access to turn 2 kills, which some combo decks don't. So it does have fast draws. It's not guaranteed by turn 3. I would say it probably is guaranteed by turn 4 on almost any draw. So it's medium speed. Dredge is around the same speed. It's a little bit faster, but what Dredge does is it turn 3s people while therapying them 3 times.
The other thing about Elves is it does have backup plans, which is something that Dredge doesn't really have access to.
Right.
Ross can win the game by just playing creatures and attacking. That's not out of the question. Whereas Dredge is all in on its one strategy. So Elves is a little more durable against sideboard hate, especially when it has access to things like Natural Order for Progenitus or Natural Order for World Spine Worm. It can get away from the combo element of the deck entirely and win with just a more manual package.
Yeah, now in a combo mirror, the backup plans don't end up showing up too often. So I would say this probably gives the matchup a slight nod in Dredge's direction, as it just has the better plan A. To be fair, sometimes you do see Dredge attempt a plan B. You always get those games where Dredge tries to aggro people with Stinkweed Imps, and they occasionally work.
It is pathetic to watch. It is definitely not what the deck is suited to do.
Right. The best part is when you watch that happen, and then you watch it win that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, the deck's plan A is mostly what it does.
So, pretty fortunate here for Ross that there's no reanimation package going on in Damon's list. Sometimes these decks have even Ellis Nord in the sideboard they can go get, and that's just game over for Elves.
Yeah, Ross may not know there's no reanimation package, so he's probably boarded in this one copy of Gaddock Teague to prevent against such things. As it is, I don't believe there's a card that Gaddock Teague stops, other than Breakthrough in Damon's deck. And we see a turn 1 Deathrite Shaman from Ross.
And Deathrite Shaman, of course, pretty potent here against Dredge. But Damon does not seem to care very much.
All right, so turn 1, he plays 2 Lion's Eye Diamonds, sacks them both, discards his entire hand, makes 7 mana. And, well, what do you do? Well, sorry, now doesn't make sense. He makes 6 mana, cracks his Sepulid Coliseum because he did have Threshold due to the fact that he was on the draw, right? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. You can't, interestingly enough, you have to wait a turn to do that line on the play. But, so now it says 3, basically he's drawing 3, then discarding 3, so he's hoping he's gonna mill himself for somewhere around 16. And maybe a little fewer. I don't know if he found, depending on what dredgers he found. He found Grave Troll, Thug, and Stinkweed Imp.
Now he has the looting left over in his graveyard.
Yeah, he did have 6 mana from the Lion's Eye Diamonds, so he still has 5 remaining. Now 3, or so spending 3 on this, so now he has 2 left. I'm not sure what colors they are at the moment. I'm not sure how much it matters as he doesn't have a hand.
This is a pretty explosive opening here from Damon.
He's milling a lot of things on turn 1. Right. Dredge can be really unfair sometimes. This is one of those times.
All right, so turn 1, I'll flip over half my deck here.
Yeah.
Got some bridges in here, some therapies. I mean, this is a real good start here.
Yeah, he did have that first Narcomoeba up top is not supposed to be in the battlefield. He did have to discard that one to Lion's Eye Diamond. So,
no, there's one that got milled.
Yeah, he milled 1, so he's going to use that one to flashback Cabal Therapy. He found 3 bridge from below, so he's going to get 3 zombie tokens off that. This is all turn 1, mind you.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean that Dredge wins on turn 3 and therapies their opponents multiple times on the way.
Yeah.
As you see, he actually has 2 more Cabal Therapies in his graveyard, and he's going to get to cast all of them this turn. Which is should be able just to take care of whatever Ross is doing.
Damon doesn't have to worry about the Craterhoof Behemoth, obviously. The Symbiote and the Natural Order are the cards with text box here, and Damon can just go after those.
Yeah, his first name, it looks like, was a swing and a miss. I imagine he would probably named Glimpse of Nature with the first one.
Yeah, that's the biggest risk.
Yeah, Ross's fast combos involve. He named Quirion Ranger. That's all. That's fine.
Sure, I guess he's worried about multiple Deathbright activations potentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't really matter too much what he names the first one. It's kind of a blind guess. It's the second 2 that he's going to actually get value off of. And he goes ahead and therapies with a Symbiote. He's going to leave Natural Order for right now.
There's no risk of Ross casting it next turn, so. unless Ross wants to use a Deathrite Shaman to strip away a therapy in the graveyard.
Yeah, he may actually, I mean, yeah, it'll be interesting. He may do that if he sees there's something worth protecting. One question is, how good of a turn does Whitby have coming up? He does have at least one Icarid in the yard. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more than one. We see his graveyard off in the upper right there. Yeah, he has just more, looks like just one copy of Icarid. So he'll get to bring that back, and when it dies, he'll get 3 more zombie tokens. He needs to be careful to not... This is one of those situations where if Ross can kill his own creature, he can actually put a decent hamper on Whitby.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Whitby would like to get a couple bridge activations here before being willing to trade.
And Ross is going to go for a card. He's going to go ahead and take that Icarid before Whitby gets the chance to bring it back. Heads up play there. So all Whitby can do on his turn is dredge 6 off that Golgari Grave Troll. We see Firestorm and another Cabal Therapy, but no Icarids, no Narcomoebas, which this means this should be a safe turn for Ross.
Yeah, and the second Deathrite Shaman gives him a lot of insurance going forward as well.
Yeah, the double Deathrite Shaman may actually be able to carry the game here.
From this spot, Damon's running out of relevant cards. Of course, he has no mana to function with, and he only has Icarids and Narcomoebas that allow him to get the ball rolling again from here.
Yeah. When you're playing playing such a different game like Dredge is here, you know, you get pretty unusual board states. Like, where, you know, right now he's milled over half his deck, but he doesn't have any. He has 0 mana sources, so as it is, 2 Deathrite Shamans is incredible against him.
And he does not choose the therapy away this natural order, so Ross has access to it this turn.
Yeah, and almost more important than the fact that Ross has a natural order is that the natural order causes Ross to sack a creature. Mm-hmm. So like natural order is the way Ross can kill his own things. Now, if Ross is feeling particularly safe here, he should be counting the dredgers that Whitby has. He has a Thug, a Stinkweed Imp, a second Thug, a second Imp, a third Imp. So he has 3 Imps, 3 Thugs, and a Grave Troll. So I guess Ross is a ways off from just hitting all the dredgers.
I'd be surprised if that's his plan. I think Ross just wants to kind of contain the Icarids and maybe the Cabal therapies as well. Because he can't really cut Damon off of his dredgers in time, at least. The game's going to be solved way before that happens.
There are sometimes, it's interesting, when you're playing against dredge, you kind of have to know a little bit of how their deck works to know what you're supposed to be hitting in the graveyard. You know, like what is their, you know, to borrow terms from like chemistry, what's their limiting reagent here? What are they going to run out of first? What can we get rid of? You know, right now it was Icarids, which is why Ross went for that one. And he's going to pass the turn back with the making Birchlore Rangers. Another mill for 6 off Golgari Grave Troll. And with the Narcomoeba trigger on the stack, Ross looks like he's going to go ahead and exile the Narcomoeba.
And this is a really problematic situation here for Damon, because it's not clear he has the ability to get any traction going at this point, because all this is predicated on him getting an Icarid or a Narcomoeba in play to restart the Cabal Therapy, now make some more zombies, now get some momentum going.
So he would have to hit a Dredge 6 with 3 copies of Narcomoeba and or Icarid, so that Ross couldn't exile all of them.
And there they go.
Yeah, the zombies went ahead and attacked. One of them was double blocked by Birchlore and Deathrite, so the Deathrite died. Now all the bridges are gone. And I think Ross has looks like he's succeeded here.
Yeah. Oh,
Birchlore. All right, now he's attacking. Yeah. All right. I mean, really, the interesting part about playing against dredges, I don't think Ross ever has to go on the aggressive here. He actually can just shut down the deck and win however he chooses to.
I mean, he can deck Damon from this spot, in fact.
You see, from Damon, an Icarid was flipped off. That was a Dredge 5 off Stinkweed Imp. Remember, Damon has no way to actually discard these dredgers, which he's putting in his hand. So his hand is just becoming this mess of Grave Trolls and Stinkweed Imps with 0 mana sources.
I think Damon is kind of realizing the writing's on the wall here. He's counting the number of things left in his deck that can get some forward traction, and there's essentially nothing. And now the bridges are gone too, so it's a whole nother dilemma.
Yeah. There's 1 bridge left still in the deck at the moment. Only 3 were exiled there. But you're right, so the bridges are gone, An Icarid is gone, a Narcomoeba's gone. Ross is taking therapies at this point. I think on that bottom row behind the Mana Confluence, I believe there is an Icarid.
I think this may be Ross just going for the kill right now. Get natural order for Crater Hoof, and that would be the ball game.
Yep. Whitby is at 15. If Ross plays land 5, natural orders for Crater Hoof, he can swing with Dryad Arbor, Birchlore Rangers, Deathrite Shaman, and the Crater Hoof himself. That should be enough damage. Korean Ranger comes into play. And yeah, that'll be enough. With Damon C, we'll bring it to game 3.
Yep. So very explosive opening there for Damon, but that demonstrated the power of Deathrite Shaman against Dredge. And part of the reason that Dredge is not as popular as it was 2 years ago, people have access to a very potent main deck card to fight Dredge. It's not going to be good enough on its own. And if Damon's on the play that game, it's possible Deathrite Shaman isn't even close to enough. But when you're supplementing it with other stuff, it's a really potent weapon.
Yeah, well, one thing that Dredge can do is because it's on such a different axis than normal Magic is that it reduces your opponent's deck to just a handful of cards. Like, if you look at Ross's deck there, all Ross's deck was, as far as Damon is concerned, was some green lands and some Deathrite Shamans.
Yeah, Dredge is one of those decks. There's a couple of them in Legacy. I think Dredge is the most pronounced of them that says, there's 15 or 20 cards in the format that I care about. However many of those you present is probably going to dictate how this match goes. But everything else is just not part of this game.
Right.
Now, unfortunately for Dredge, those 15 or 20 cards, a lot of them are prevalent features of the format. And so it doesn't win every tournament, but it does minimize and marginalize what your opponent is up to.
Yeah, some of those cards go in and out in popularity. And some of, Deathrite Shaman is probably the biggest issue for Dredge right now because that, no matter how the sea of Legacy is moving back and forth, there are going to be Deathrite Shamans. Mm-hmm. But take a card like Scavenging Ooze. That's a card that goes in and out of popularity and probably really does affect how good Dredge is at a given tournament.
So Deathrite Shaman, I think, is a blessing and a curse for Dredge. It's bad on the surface, of course. It's a main deckable card that's good at disrupting graveyards. The upside is, because Deathrite Shaman is so prevalent, a lot of people feel like they don't need to sideboard the especially heinous graveyard hate. So 2 or 3 years ago, you used to see 4X Leyline of the Void. I remember playing Burden tournaments where I had 4 Tormod's Crypt. This was just kind of industry standard.
You had to stop Dredge.
You had to stop Dredge. And now, because of Deathrite Shaman, people feel that they could skimp on the sideboard hate, both because they have Deathrite Shaman in their deck, and so they have some game against Dredge, and also because people assume that people won't play Dredge anymore, or decks like it, because of Deathrite Shaman. So I'm sure Damon is going to be playing against way fewer Leyline of the Voids in this tournament than he would have 3 years ago, although he's going to be playing against a bunch of Deathrite Shamans game 1.
I mean, when you think about it, about a year and a half ago, they printed probably the most hateful graveyard card to date in Rest in Peace. It is Tormod's Crypt on top of Leyline of the Void. This is a card that Dredge really has trouble beating.
Well, it speaks a lot to the power level of Dredge, where Rest in Peace is often just too slow because two mana's too much.
Too many.
You get it gets therapied away, or the Dredge board can be too advanced by the time Rest in Peace comes down.
Right.
So Rest in Peace is potent, but 2 mana is a lot to pay in Legacy.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that that hate card is printed, and yet Dredge flourishes as a deck because, like you're saying, when Deathrite Shaman sees play too, then people don't just load up on Rest in Pieces, even though they could be doing it.
You see, now Rest in Peace is pretty popular in Legacy, in part because it's very good against a lot of Tarmogoyf, Nimble Mongoose style decks.
Yeah.
And so Rest in Peace is pretty common because it does double duty. It's good in those decks as well. But Leyline of the Void, Tormod's Crypt, you just see far fewer of those copies of those cards than you saw a few years ago.
Yeah, these 0 mana answers that Dredge can't deal with.
Yeah. So shuffling up for game 3, Ross, a known Elves aficionado, and had a lot of success on the Open Series over the last couple of years. Hasn't played as many tournaments recently, was really grinding a few years back, but Invitational top 8, bunch of success in the Open Series as well.
All right, so game 3, this will put Damon on the play again. Dredge is a deck that mulligans a ton. Thanks in part, as you noticed, that last hand, Damon only used 3 cards out of his opening hand. He used Colosseum, Lion's Eye Diamond, and the other 4 cards just didn't matter. So
the deck is inconsistent from the standpoint of it often has to mulligan its opening hands, but it is consistent insofar as once the ball's rolling, it's going to do its thing because the deck just flips it just flips its deck over.
It rarely utilizes all 7 cards in its opening hand. So, like, it can mulligan a ton and not be affected.
I had lost 2 3-card dredge hands.
Sure. Sometimes even on turn 3.
Yeah.
So Faithless Looting is a turn 1 play for Damon. He's off Gemstone Mine. Gemstone Mine pretty great in a deck that you only really ever tap a land 3 times anyway.
And Ross has got to be breathing a sigh of relief here. No Dredger from Damon on the first turn. Kept an opening hand without a Dredger, but with Faithless Looting.
Yeah, he discards Narcomoeba and Icarid. Ross, once again, we said the card that matters. That was in his opener. He cracks a fetch into Deathrite Shaman. We'll see if Whitby can find what he's looking for here. He's going to Careful Study off that Gemstone Mine. Basically another Faithless Looting.
Now the big haymaker that he has so far, the way the game is shaping up, is those copies of Firestorm. That allows him to get out of this and get the ball rolling. But in the meantime, he's going to have to try to overwhelm this Deathrite Shaman, and it's going to be very challenging with no way to get the ball rolling out of his graveyard.
Yeah, the difficult part is if he has Firestorm, he probably can't afford to wait and get Ross's whole board with the Firestorm. He may have to Firestorm 2 creatures. It's possible he would even have to Firestorm just a Deathrite Shaman if it gets bad enough.
And Ross did see Firestorm as Damon was dredging in the second game, so it's going to be something on Ross's radar. These are these tough opening hands for Dredge. You know, you keep the hands with no Dredger, with a lot of ways to look at cards, but you got to do it quickly. Time is not on your side.
And yeah, discards Golgari Thug and Cabal Therapy. Mana Confluence, Lotus Petal. He has actually another Mana Confluence in his hand. It's one of those rare games where, well, not rare, but sometimes Dredge, like if it gets 3 lands, then they can start doing things like flashing back Faithless Looting with real mana sources.
So this is going to be a breakthrough for one here from Damon, just trying to find enough Dredgers over the course of this Thug Dredge to get something going.
Yeah, Breakthrough, an interesting card. It's cast usually for X equals 1 or 0 out of the Dredge deck. You draw 4, and you discard everything but X. So sometimes it's actually just 0. You know, draw 4, then discard everything. Here he's going to get to keep 1 card. He'll probably keep a land. Maybe a Firestorm if he finds one. I suppose Firestorm would be the ideal card to keep.
Yeah. But it looks like he's just finding a bunch of Dredgers here.
All right, so he's dumping cards in the graveyard. Among the highlights, he has dumped 2 Bridge from Belows, a pair of Cabal Therapies. He has now a pair of Icarids in the yard as well. He has a pair of a trio of Faithless Lootings. So a lot of Dredgers, a pair of Icarids, a pair of Lootings, and a pair of Therapies. He has almost all the tools are in his yard now.
So Damon got fairly fortunate there to find enough Dredgers as he was going, because if he just dead-ended off of that Thug, the game might just be over. I mean, there was no real backup plan here, but he found enough Stinkweed Imps and Golgari Grave Trolls to keep the ball rolling for now.
Yeah, the one thing he did not find is he didn't hit any Narcomoebas that turn. So after the breakthrough resolved, he didn't have any more plays, and he's passed back to Ross.
And if he finds a couple of Narcomoebas in that sequence, that could be really explosive, because then he gets the therapy, start triggering his bridges. As it stands, though, Ross is untouched going into his second turn.
All right. So, yeah, Ross untaps with the 1 land and the Deathrite Shaman. Let's see where he goes from here. So if the clock's ticking and I'm Ross right now, I'm wondering, how many turns before things get real bad? Real bad either in you die or you get therapied so many times that your hand's gone.
Thus far, if Ross is a really perceptive player, which I believe he is, he's seen a lot of Damon's deck throughout these 3 games. He's seen no copy of Flamekin Zealot. He's seen no copy of Dread Return. So he can pretty safely assume that there's no combo package going on in Damon's deck, which means he's likely going to have to win over the course of several turns unless some incredible series of dredges happen. So Ross has a lot more time than he would against some other builds of dredge, because Damon has not demonstrated any ability to just go off with Flamekin Zealot in 1 turn.
Well, speaking of going off, Ross is having quite the turn himself. We're going to walk through how this started. He did not have the second land or didn't play one. He played a Quirion Ranger with his first mana. Then he used Deathrite Shaman, exiling one of Damon's lands to make a mana. That mana was used to cast Heritage Druid. Then Quirion Ranger, untapped Deathrite Shaman, bounced the Bayou. So then he had 3 creatures. Those creatures used to Heritage Druid tapped to make 3 green mana. The 4th green, then he played a land, used the 3 green mana to cast Green Sun Zenith for 2, finding Scavenging Ooze, and that Bayou is still up. So he has 1 more activation, and next turn, so this is like an aggressive strategy from Russ, because this turn he has 1 activation of Scavenging Ooze, and next turn he'll have 4, 5, enough to really stop the Dredge deck.
Right. So I imagine that Ross here is going to be going after Icarid because you can't really cut Damon off of dredging.
Yeah, he's going to go ahead. We will see here. I mean, next turn he can cut Damon off dredging, most likely. I don't know. It's possible. I don't know exactly if we count how many dredgers. It's possible that Ross can get all of them. But this turn, yeah, Icarid seems like a likely candidate. Maybe Faithless Looting. Well, no, probably not Faithless Looting. If he has something to protect, I suppose he could get a Therapy, but Icarid seems likely.
There doesn't seem to be any other really clear path here. It's also possible that Ross is just not going to use Scavenging Ooze this turn and set up further because there's no particular angle he can cut Damon off of. But Ross appears to be activating Scavenging Ooze. And it looks like he's targeting that Grave Troll.
Yeah, goes and hits Golgari Grave Troll. So he's going to work on the dredgers. There's still a lot left for Damon right now. So you see Damon still has a Thug and a Stinkweed Imp. The remainder of his dredgers are actually, it's a Grave Troll, a Thug, and a Stinkweed Imp, are in Damon's hand right now. He has dredged them, but he hasn't had a way to re-discard some of them.
So he's looking at that 3rd Icarid right now. There appears to be only the 3 black creatures in the graveyard. So he would lose his 3 other dredgers if he wanted to do this and get back his Grave Troll.
Yeah, he has 3 black dredgers and a Grave Troll. So he has 4 dredgers total in his graveyard. It's a pretty high price to get rid of all your dredgers, but I'm not sure that Whitby has another line. When Ross gets to untap with that Scavenging Ooze, things are going to get bad for him.
And I think the reason that Damon's doing this, the card he left in his hand last turn after the Breakthrough was another copy of Breakthrough. So he needs to make sure there's enough dredgers there for him to be able to prime the pump and get the ball rolling again with the Breakthrough.
And we see right now he dredges Golgari Grave Troll, putting another Thug into the graveyard.
So it looks like there's some response going on here. Yeah, it's going to be Quirion Ranger getting the Deathrite Shaman up.
Okay. So yeah, he milled 2 Golgari Thugs and a Stinkweed Imp, so 3 more black dredgers there. And right now, Ross he's nuke heaves. He managed to get rid of the bridges.
Yeah. All right, so here's that Breakthrough.
All right, so it's break.
And there's 2 more dredgers and an Archimedes, so that's a big win for Damon here.
Yeah, he has enough dredgers that he should be able to survive a turn of Scavenging Oozing. I don't think Ross can get all the dredgers.
No.
He milled 3. Yeah, this turn he's milled 3 Thugs and a Stinkweed Imp. You see right now there's actually a couple arts of Thug. The one under that, in row 2, next to the card behind Golgari Thug is another Golgari Thug. It's just a different picture of Thug.
And there is another bridge and another Narcomoeba. At this point, you saw Damon count out. He's concerned about getting decked at this stage. But his graveyard is really stocked.
Yeah, he has pretty much all the tools in his deck are in his yard right now. The question is if it's enough to win. Yeah, he dredged Thug there with concession to the size of his own deck. And then he has to discard his entire hand.
So here come the Narcomoebas.
Yep, 3 into play. Remember, no Dread Return here, so there's no he can't Flamekin Zealot for the win immediately. If his deck had access to Dread Return and Flamekin Zealot, this would be a kind of situation where he could instant win with it.
Yeah. Yeah, with the therapies and the number of bridges, he'd be in a great position to win outright.
That's what I still like what he's doing here. If he gets enough disruption and enough zombies down, it seems unlikely that he won't still win. I suppose Ross could natural order into a lethal Crater Hoof, but this all depends on just how many zombies Damon can make. Yeah, first therapy named Glimpse of Nature. That one's gonna miss. Now we can see just how many, just what cards Whitby wants to take. And this game seems pretty good for Damon.
Yeah, he's getting out in front, and this speaks a lot to the power of Dredge here. I mean, there is a Deathrite Shaman, a Scavenging Ooze, a lot of mana involved here, and it looks like Damon has the tools to power through it.
Yeah, second Narcomoeba dies to therapy. That's going to take the Deathrite Shaman from Ross's hand. Third Narcomoeba flashes back to therapy. That's going to take the natural order. And he has a huge army of zombies. So many zombies that we've run out of Sam Blacks.
Yeah.
We're on to just the regular token. Silly, that we only have eight of the arts. Really, I mean.
Not even close to enough.
And he's actually flashed back the fourth therapy there. He's going to get rid of one of his own Icarids to do so. He's gotta find more zombies.
Yep. Maybe go back to his initial tokens.
There we go. Here's some more. Now he's going to take Elvish Visionary. So he currently has 12 2/2s and an Icarid in play. And when the Icarid dies, he's going to get 3 more.
Yeah. Unless Ross is willing to block with the Scavenging Ooze, in which case the Icarid and the Ooze trade, and that's Ross's big game plan from here, because Damon can just win by attacking with zombies over and over again. So we'll see momentarily if Ross wants to run a block out there, but it appears he values his Ooze too highly.
All right, so swings in with Icarid, gets 3 damage in, gets more zombies. We have 15 zombies, it looks like, in play.
And even a boatload of mana and Scavenging Ooze and Deathrite Shaman does not appear to be enough for Ross to get out of this. Now, he still has some pretty big draws, and he may have just found one there with Green Sun Zenith.
Yeah, with Green Sun, Ross could still have a chance here. As odd as it sounds. The attack next turn is, if the number's right, if there's 15 zombies, that's a swing for 30. The most number of zombies Ross can let through is 8, so he'd have to have 7 blockers. That seems difficult. I don't think he can get that far.
Well, he can gain a lot of life with the Scavenging Ooze and remove the Icarids from the graveyard. So he doesn't necessarily have to block all of those zombies. Some of that can be dealt with by just gaining life with Scavenging Ooze.
So the question is, if he has a Green Sun, right, what is the card? Like, what is he Green Sun for would be the question.
Well, there's not really much in the way of utility he can get from here that matters all that much. I almost imagine that this has to be trying to set up for Crater Hoof Behemoth, because he has a pretty substantial board.
Yeah, so you want him to hang on to the Zenith so that he can Crater Hoof at some point.
I believe so, and with Damon's therapies gone, it's not like you have to worry about that just getting tagged.
Yeah, I mean, he can maybe take 1 hit. He certainly can't take 2. I don't think he's gonna have enough blockers to, I don't think he can, remove the zombie army at any point. He can maybe take a hit from it, and that's about it. Remember, Fintorn Elves is a free cast here because it's a 3rd elf. It goes with Heritage and Quirion Ranger to make 3 green. Deathrite makes a 4th, so he gets to throw that card out for free.
Mm-hmm.
He has the access to 4 Scavenging Ooze activations. That puts him to 21, but then he would only have... So he could block 4 zombies, then he's only taking 22 damage. He could block 5 zombies, so he's only taking 20. He could then gain 4 and go up to 21. So if he jumps away his team, he can survive. I don't know. The question is, to what end?
Yeah, because he needs to have a fairly dense board to be able to Zenith for a Crater Hoof for any effect.
Right. So yeah, he could survive this attack and go to 1. But he would kill 1 zombie in the process.
And lose everything.
Yeah, and actually to do that, he would have to let Damon get the Icarids back too. So no, he doesn't get to live.
Yeah.
Because he has to block and then tap guys to make that work. So right now, I don't know if he has a way to survive the attack. So what he's going to have to try to do is, if he maybe use the Zenith, he's going to have to use the Zenith to start some sort of card drawing chain. Just, like picture the ideal scenario and try to combo off here.
So does it involve a Zenith for 2 to get Elvish Visionary?
That would be my thought would be to do that. I'm not sure how he, so he starts with Elvish Visionary. He may have to naturally draw Wirewood Symbiote off the Elvish Visionary. And then from there, I'm not sure that he can do it. He's closer.
Oh.
He's going to Green Sun for 1. He's going to get the Symbiote half of the package. And my question is how he draws more cards off this, or this seems to be the end of the line right now.
Well, he's dead-ended on drawing cards this turn.
Right.
I mean, there's nowhere else to go. But he may be trying to just chump out of this turn and then get something going next turn.
Yeah, if he chumps out this turn and starts next turn, he would need something he'd need to keep Heritage Druid alive. I don't see how he survives yet, but Ross is quite the experienced pilot with the deck.
Yeah.
So we'll see what he has in store here. If he had a Glimpse of Nature in hand, then this could work.
Sure.
So it might have to be, what he may have to try to do is give himself a board where if he top decks Glimpse of Nature and runs the perfect Glimpse of Nature out, he can draw his whole deck. If Elves draws perfectly off a Glimpse, it does not need much to start an infinite turn-off Glimpse.
So Ross trying to figure out what he wants to untap to this Quirion Ranger.
Yeah, he's bouncing the land, untapping. He also gets another untap. He can untap everything this turn thanks to Visionary. Yeah, so he's untapping Heritage Druid. Then he's gonna, he returns an elf to untap the Findhorn Elves, plays the land, use the mana of Findhorn Elves to basically he recasts everything.
Yeah. This is
a simple way to put it.
Maximum blockers and maximum mana to start using Scavenging Ooze.
He's gonna start using Ooze. Ooze will eat 3 Icarids, I imagine.
Yeah. Icarids are priority 1, and then Dredgers are a nice luxury.
That'll put Ross up to 20. And he does have, he used the Elvish, he used the Ranger twice, I believe.
Yeah.
Which is why he can't play the land. Whitby stacks it up, untaps, swings the team. I don't think Ross survives this one anymore.
Yeah, Damon didn't even look at what he drew. He just marching on over. 15 zombies marching on over.
Right, Ross has to block 6 of them. He has 6 creatures. It's possible. He actually only has to block 5. He can eat a creature with the Scavenging Ooze to go to 21.
The problem is that his board collapses in all this, so Ross has to be really judicious with whatever he chump blocks with because he needs a base of stuff to even try to go off next turn.
And he can't do it. So this game goes to Whitby.
Yeah.
We'd have to keep, he'd want to keep it so that he has some sort of elf, he'd bounce an elf to his hand and try to keep enough mana creatures in play. Say, ideally he'd want to keep Heritage Druid and 2 elves alive so that if he drew Glimpse, he could start a Glimpse, make 3, bounce a guy, then start glimpsing. But I don't think he can keep enough resources left in play to do that.